Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to a whole nother episode. Now today I am tackling my biggest project to date, and that's rebuilding this massive staircase. Now this was a huge undertaking filled with literal blood, sweat, and tears, but the end result's totally worth it. Now I can't wait to take you through the entire transformation, so why don't we rewind a few weeks and get back to the very beginning. So the staircase in its current state is okay, perfectly functional, but it's very tired looking, it's worn, and it's super outdated. And it doesn't really go with the new updates that we're doing to the house. It's also the first thing you see as you enter the house, and personally, I think I can turn it into more of a grand entrance. And with the old pet stained carpet going, it's time to focus on the spindles and the railings, which is the kind of work that is no match for the mighty Sawzall. And to be honest, even though I have the rush of excitement due to demo day, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the sheer amount of work that I have ahead of me. This is a huge project and there's loads to do. But that's what makes it exciting, right? With each piece removed, I'm one step closer to something fresh and modern. So let's get this space cleared out and start moving on the next phase. So the white paneling that you see looks perfectly fine, and if I were to replace it, I'd only replace it with something similar, so I might as well repair it and paint it. However, unfortunately the paneling was cut a little bit shy of the risers and the treads, which didn't matter before because they both had a lip to kind of cover all of that. However, my new treads and risers don't, and that's a bit too much of a gap to fill with caulk, so I'm gonna have to repair a section of each of the riser. Next, I made a simple jig that needs to be attached nice and level so I can cut a clean section out. For this, I'm using a template bit and my router. This combination is perfect to get a nice clean cut. Once that's done, I'm able to fill the gap with a larger piece of MDF. The goal here is to create a solid, smooth surface to work with. After that, it's time to mix up some Bondo. Now I'll apply a couple of smooth coats to even everything out, obviously sanding in between each coat. And I'll top it off with a thin coat of painter's putty. Now this stuff looks like pasta sauce, it actually looks like a huge mess. But it doesn't matter because I'm going to clean it up with a nice coat of primer. It's all about building up a smooth, even surface. Okay, so now after what felt like an absolute eternity of filling, sanding, priming, I think I'm now ready enough, or ready as I'll ever be, to start applying the paint. Now for the paint, I'm going to be using just regular old trim paint that matches the rest of the house. But to apply the paint, I'm using this thing. Now I'm spraying the trim with my Graco Quick Shot. Honestly, it's definitely faster than brushing and it's a way nicer finish, but I'll admit it, I haven't always had the best track record when it comes to spraying. Fortunately, this sprayer really makes light work of it. With a smooth, even coat, this is gonna look absolutely sick. It's jobs like this that make the days of prep work totally worth it. Okay, so with all the trim around the stairs fully completed, I'm super happy with that spray finish. I still, however, have to repair and paint the walls, but in the meantime doing all that, we can head on into the shop and start the fun stuff. Now when I say the phrase fun things, well that phrase quickly shrivels up and dies when it sees the sheer amount of white oak that I purchased for this project. Now we got a few different thicknesses and I'll explain what and why as this project progresses. But for now, I really got to get into stage one of the mill up. Now stage one of the mill up is usually my favorite stage of any project because I get to break down all this rough material into nice smooth pieces. And as I'm breaking those larger boards into more usable material, organization is key here. As I go, I'm labeling everything to keep track of the pieces. A little extra effort now will save me a lot of time and headaches later. And once that's done, I'm heading over to the other shop to joint and play in the white oak. Now I'll put them through the jointer to get a nice crisp edge, and then I'll run them through the planer to get them nice and flat. It's super satisfying work, and it's all about getting these pieces perfectly flat and square so I have a nice clean slate per se to work from. Okay, so everything has gone through the stage 1 of the mill up, so it's all nice and flat, and it's got nice square edges on either side. Now this pile here is a pile of flat cut white oak, and these are going to be what's for the stair treads. And because I'm gluing a few pieces together, I've spent pretty much a whole day trying to reorganize this stack so that each 2 boards for each tread and each pile for each one of the landings kind of flow together with a matching kind of color, tone, and wood grain. Now you're never going to get this perfect, but spend the time doing this now, the end result's going to look way better. So now, with all that organized, I'm going to have to spend another few days gluing them all together. Now to help me glue the boards together, I'm going to be using my domino cutter. Some people might say that using a domino is cheating, but hey, I'm not here to argue. I'm just here to get things done efficiently. And then once all my dominoes are cut, I'll glue all the boards together, and then I'll chuck them in the clamps and leave them overnight. And then the next day I can take them over to the mill shop and get them all cleaned up. It's funny, most of woodworking is just about making wood smaller, but those are all the little steps that come together to create something solid and functional. Now this right here is a pile of perfectly flat, perfectly thick stair treads. Now they're all way long and way deeper than they need to be, and that's a really good thing for now at least, because well, my wife likes to test my woodworking abilities, that's the polite way of putting it, and she has decided that she doesn't want the treads and the risers to be the exact same thickness. She wants the treads to be thicker. Now that's okay, but the treads and the risers are the exact same thickness. Now, because these are wider and they are longer than they need to be, I have a plan. Now this here, what I've been playing with is a tread that's way thicker. Or is it? No, it's not. Well, it kind of is, but it's not. It's the same thickness tread, but it has a wider lip all the way around, which is mitered on, giving it the appearance of a thicker tread, and that's what I'm going to do to these, as they are way wider and longer in length. I have the material to do so. But this isn't an ordinary miter, it's what's called a Loctite miter. Now these are pretty simple to cut, and they are very, very effective. You just need a Loctite miter bit, which you can buy for your router table. Fortunately, I don't have one right now, but I do have a friend who has a professional woodworking shop that has one for a shaper, which has a power feed, and that sounds a lot nicer to me right now. So I'm gonna head over and use that. But first, I gotta cut all these to width and their length, and then make sure I label all the offcuts so the grain can flow all the way around the tread. Now over at my buddy's workshop, shout out JKB Woodworks, he has a shaper with a power feeder, and this thing is sick. The shaper is definitely the right tool for this job. It's designed to handle bigger cuts with ease and precision. Power feeder makes that process even smoother too, feeding the material through. That way I don't really have to lose my fingertips like I would on my router table. Speaking of, now after using this thing, it makes my diddly little router table feel totally inadequate. Okay, so we're back in my shop, unfortunately. However, we do have a whole mountain of parts to put back together, which is good because this project is taking such a long time. And it doesn't help that I spent the afternoon in A&E getting my fingers stitched back together because of one of these pieces of wood slipped through my hand and sliced the end of my finger. And it wasn't even that pointy part, it was like the square part, which I don't know whether it's it's an attest to my jointing ability that I can get it so sharp it can cut skin, or I just have soft fingers. Anyway, let's get putting this stuff together. Now that it's time to glue all the front lips to all of the treads, I need to make sure that the grains line up perfectly so the whole thing flows together. Now this is the sort of thing that would make or break this whole project. To help the lips flow together, I'm going to miter the two together. For ease, I'm going to cut this with my miter sled on my table saw. And next I can glue all the parts of each tread together to hopefully morph them into one solid looking tread, to which I hope my wife approves. It's all about those little details that really help the final product come to life. And with all that done, we got a nice looking stair tread that's way thicker than it needs to be. They actually look really, really nice, and I'm super happy. So I've gone ahead and I've repeated those steps like a gazillion times, and I've got all the treads made up. So now all I'm going to do is go ahead and clean them up and sand them. Then I can put them aside and start focusing on the risers. Now for the risers, I'm going to be using the same white oak 3/4 inch thick material. However, I am going to be using a slightly different cut of grain. Now remember, I mentioned that I was going to use a flat cut for the treads. However, I am going to use a rift cut for the risers. Now the rift is a little bit more expensive. However, there's a lot of material here. There's a lot of white oak, and most of it is going to be flat cut. And too much flat cut, especially in oak, can look country real quick. Too much rift can look super modern, which is okay. Modern is my favorite style. However, this house isn't modern. So I figured it's going to have a nice break in between each step, having a bit of rift, and it's just going to flow real nice. I've used it in the past, and it's worked really well. Now the risers themselves are built pretty much the same way as the treads, just without this big wide lip. They don't need to be thicker than they are. They can remain 3/4. However, they are a little bit skinny, so we gotta do something about that. Now I'm gluing up the risers, and it's pretty much the same process as with the treads. The most important thing is to make sure that the grain and the color tones flow between each piece. And then like before, I'll bring them over to the other side once they've dried, and then get them milled up nice and flat. It's repetitive work, but it's the small details that make it all come together in the end. Okay, so now that the risers are milled up, they're slightly longer in width and length. Like the treads, I gotta kind of scribe them in when I come to install them. So for now, I can go throw them into the pile of things that are pretty much ready to go, and then start on the next thing. Now this, believe it or not, is not actually a post. Well, it is a post, but it's a fake post. And that's what I'm gonna do out of this stack here. So each one of these are 3.5 inches wide, and there's a lock miter on all 4 of the corners holding it together. Now, obviously I'm gonna fill this in with solid material once I come glue all this together. But for now, I'm gonna turn this pile right here into 8 or 9 of these guys. Okay, so now as soon as I can figure out how to get people to watch my videos, I'm gonna buy me one of those shapers. But now I'm back in my own shop, and I've assembled one of those posts. And it's incredible how well it holds together, even without glue, just kind of holding it. Obviously, you can still see that the inside is hollow, which is no good, but that's a pretty easy fix. Now I've gone ahead and I've raided my scrap pile, and I've made, a couple of these, a handful of these. And it's basically 3 pieces of scrap pieces of wood that I didn't really like, glued together, milled up nice and straight to the exact inside measurement of this post. So then once it's all slipped in and put back together, that's one heavy solid post. So now all I've got to do is basically glue all these together. Now I'm gluing all these parts together to form a new post that'll mimic the look of one solid piece. It's a bit of a trick, really, getting these pieces to fit seamlessly, but that's the beauty of woodworking. It's all about taking individual pieces and making them come together to create something that looks like made out of one solid block. Once everything is glued up and dry, I'll mill it again to make sure it's nice and flat and nice and smooth. It's not the most exciting step, but it's one of those necessary moments that sets up the rest of the build. Once it's all cleaned up, these posts will be ready to go. All right, so with the posts done, we're pretty much ready to get these things installed. Oh, the railings. Now for the railings, I can't really do any weird magic tricks like the treads and the posts to make them look thicker than they are, so I have to use actual thick material. Now here I got a bunch of 8/4, 2-inch thick, flat cut white oak, and this should be perfect. Now milling up the material for the handrail is just like the same process as before, except it's like 50 times more difficult. Reason being is these are like 12 feet long white oak pieces, and they're a real challenge. Trying to get something this long and heavy, perfectly flat, takes a lot of muscle and a bit of patience. It's tricky, but it's necessary to get them to the point where they're ready for the next step. Okay, so now with the handrail cut, obviously I can't leave these real sharp square edges because that would be extremely uncomfortable. But I also don't want to put a heavy round over on there because I don't really like the look of that. So I found this thumbnail router bit, which compared to a traditional round over, it's obviously a lot less subtle. And it's not designed for the profile that I'm trying to create, but I feel like I can make it work. Basically just have a real long bar of soap, but I'm okay with that because it looks real nice and it feels real nice on the hands too. Okay, so believe it or not, and this is pretty huge now, we have the 2 decks, the treads, the risers, the posts, the railings over there. You know what's crazy? That was the easy part. The hardest part is puzzling this all together to make a nice looking staircase, so I guess that's what's coming up. Now I can finally start dry fitting the treads and risers to the staircase. Now like every staircase, you always want to start from the first riser and work your way up. Now each riser needs Scribe into the staircase. I like to keep them a hair longer so that I have something to caulk to hide any minor little gaps. Now as part of the process to lock this whole staircase together, I'm using my domino to join the risers and treads. This helps lock everything together and ensures the risers are flush with the back of the treads. It's a simple but effective way to make sure that everything stays aligned and sturdy as I continue the build. Any help with alignment at this stage will make it so much easier when I come and permanently fix these treads and risers down. And once everything is locked together, I'm going to take some time and screw the treads and risers into place on the staircase. I'm screwing them at points that are going to be hidden by either the next tread or the next riser, so you'll never see these on the final product. This helps keeps things clean and ensures that I'm not going to have a landslide when I step on one of the treads and slide all the way down to the bottom. Now I'll be repeating a lot of these steps as I work my way up the staircase. Now this thing is starting to take shape and it's looking incredible. I'm getting so freaking excited. Now halfway up the staircase, there are 2 large landings which require a couple more extra steps. No pun intended. Now the scribing of these 2 decks are a little bit more difficult because they have to go in and around the actual staircase itself and underneath the trim as well. So I'm doing a few different techniques here. Now rather than scribing the decks around the trim, I figured it'd be a lot easier and probably better to cut the trim to sit on top of the decks. And this is also going to help hold it down and lock it in once it's in its final position. Now I'm just going to be repeating the same steps up the stairs as I continue to work my way up. I'm scribing, dominoing, screwing everything into place just like I did with the lower section. It's all about keeping the consistency, making sure each tread and riser is locked in securely and perfectly in place. Now it's super repetitive, but that's just the nature of building stairs. Trust me, I know. I've spent the last 3-4 weeks literally just repeating step after step after step. Now, if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say I appreciate you so much. Now, each part of this project gets better and better as we progress. And if you feel like it, go and hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. So the treads and the risers are all scribed and dry fitted, and they are looking freaking sick. I got some real clean lines going on. The stoke is high. Now, I don't know if this comes across on the camera, but I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of making this up as I go along, and that's usually the case for most of my projects. Now, my next step was going to be to dry fit and scribe all the posts and the railings. However, I'm real concerned for the treads and risers and the potential for cupping. And obviously they're unfinished, and having one big open face, especially on the two decks, isn't ideal over a long period of time, and it could cause cupping, which will wreak havoc on all my clean straight lines and all the scribing that I've done. So I think my safest bet for now is to take everything out, give it all a really good sand, and start thinking about applying some finish. So for the finish for the treads and the risers, I'm using Bona Traffic HD, which is the industry standard for floor finishing. Now this finish also requires a sealer which comes in several colors. I've gone with natural to keep the look clean and simple. The best part is how easily it is to apply. Now you just roll on the sealer, which helps the durability, moisture resistance, and gives it a nice smooth base for the finish. And under the right temperatures, this stuff dries really quick, so you can almost get all of your coats done in the same day. And after just applying the sealer coat, you can really see the colors pop, and you kind of get an idea of how it's all going to come together. Now once the sealer has dried, it does raise the grain, so I'm going to knock off the high spots with a light sand. Now for the top coat, I did go with the anti-slip, as it is going to be on stairs. That just kind of made sense to me. And this stuff is usually made for flooring, so when you're mixing up small quantities, as this is a two-part finish, it is kind of difficult, but once you figure it out, it basically rolls on the same way as the sealer. Okay, so one, the shop is extremely messy and it's stressing me out, but two, it is full to the brim of treads and risers, and I'm pretty happy about that. Now each one has a seal coat and 3 top coats, and that's what these guys recommend for their most durable finish. And as I live in a house full of creatures that don't respect wood, including Wolf and my wife, I think it's best that I listen and take the extra precautions and get as many layers on as I possibly can. Now as this stuff dries pretty quick, so you can get multiple layers on in a day, it's really handy. So I gotta let it sit here and cure for a few hours and then think about getting all this permanently installed. Now this stuff is fast drying, but I did let it cure for at least 24 hours. And then once it has finally cured, I can then start gluing all the treads and risers permanently into place using my secret weapon. Now it's not that much of a secret, it's just standard PL construction adhesive, but it is what all the professional stair builders and installers use to stick down their treads and risers. Now after applying a healthy amount of PL, it's always a good idea to peel up your material and check that you got good even coverage. And have you ever walked down a staircase or walked along a floor and it squeaks? Well, that squeak is usually wood on wood contact. So anywhere where the wood is going to touch, so from the riser to the underside of the tread, I've also put a no more nails that dries clear, so that if there's any ooze out, you can't see it, and it just helps glue it all together, and it creates that bit of a barrier to help take out the risk of squeaks. And as I've spent all this time out of my life rebuilding this staircase, the last thing I want to do is for it to squeak every time I walk up and down it. Now with each tread and riser, when I'm gluing it down to the actual frame of the staircase, I'm making sure that they are sitting nice and level and flat. That ensures that the next tread and the next riser is also going to sit nice and flat too. I'm also adding a little bit of weight to each step to make sure that nothing kind of slips or rises out of place, at least until the glue has dried. And the funny thing is, my wife said that I would never use those weights when I bought them. Okay, so all of the treads and risers except the very top last one are all permanently installed, which means they ain't ever coming out again. Well, hopefully anyway. And you can see I've laid some flooring protection down to protect the treads and risers while I'm still working on them. Now, speaking of protection, it's now time for me to start thinking about the posts and railings, which means I gotta take some of these temporary railings out, which has kind of been protecting my life while I work on that. So that's kind of scary, but it's also kind of exciting at the same time. Okay, so my plan is to start from this post here and then work my way across and then down the staircase. But you'll notice that the flooring here is kind of half finished, half being laid, and there's a reason for that. And that's because this flooring essentially flows into the staircase. So I needed to get this done first, and then I can kind of finish this all off. However, although the floor is white oak and so is the stair treads, the floor itself has a bunch of different colors, tones, and variants, and I spent a bunch of times picking out the most perfect material for the stair treads. So to make them kind of seamlessly flow together is going to be a bit of a headache, but I've got an idea. Now my plan is to lip along this long run, across this top step, and then return it back into that wall. And I'm going to make it entirely out of the flooring material. Now I've gone through a bunch of the packs of flooring and picked out the best pieces that match the stair treads and risers. And I'm going to simulate these pieces to make them look like the stair tread. Now this is a stair tread that I made previously, or is it? No, it's not, I tricked you. Now this is a piece of flooring that I've mitered around, lipped around to kind of simulate the exact same shape as these stair treads. And I feel like this is gonna be pretty convincing. Now building this staircase is like building a big Lego set, or like imagine the most extreme IKEA cabinet ever. One thing's got to go in so the next thing can go in so that the other thing can go in, and so on and so forth. Basically what I'm saying is that the post at the top of the stairs has to go in before everything else. It's also attached differently to the rest of the posts on the staircase. Now I'm using a half lap joint to attach the post to the framing in the subfloor. This is a great way to make sure the post is securely anchored and it won't shift over time. Now once the joinery is cut into the bottom of the post, I can then sit it in a position where it's sitting nice and plumb and nice and straight. Now before I permanently attach it, to create a bit of a neater transition between my flooring and the post, I'm going to notch out a small section on the post so that the flooring can somewhat sit in, and it looks like that the post is going to sit on top of the flooring, where it actually isn't. And then once that's done, I can then attach the post permanently using a mixture of PL, normal nails, and JRK framing screws, making sure that the whole post sits nice and perfectly level. And then here you can kind of see what I mean by when the flooring slips in under the post, it looks like the post is sat on top. I can then go ahead and glue that fake stair tread, nosing, flooring, whatever you want to call it, permanently down into position. Okay, so that went pretty well. It's pretty damn convincing, and I've impressed myself once again. And now that that post is in, this section is done, I can now concentrate on getting this post in and then figuring out how to connect the two. Now for this post here, as it's against a wall, I've gone ahead and ripped a full post in half, and I'm going to use one half of it against that wall. Now I start off by setting up my laser level to mark the height of my railings. However, in hindsight, I think this was a mistake where I should have just measured from the floor, as the rest of the staircase is measured from the nosing of each step, and if the floor is way out of level, then there's going to be a bit of a height difference either end. Fortunately for me in this situation, it wasn't an issue. Now for the joinery between the two, I didn't want any visible fixings. I wanted it to look seamless. That's why I'm using the domino here to create a strong hidden connection between the two pieces. The goal is for everything to come together in a way that it all was made out of one continuous piece. However, as the project progresses, I do end up changing this approach slightly. Now once all the dominoes are cut, I can then figure out how to glue and kind of get this railing and post system together. Now it was a lot of shuffling, a lot of wiggling around to get them all kind of locked in, but once they're all together, this whole system was completely solid. And then once it's in, I can then clamp it any which way I possibly can. And then I also threw in a couple of screws through the half post into the studs of the wall. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and laid the remaining flooring that was missing here on the landing. Now you'll notice that I've got a little gap all the way around the edge here, and that's because I'm going to replace these sections with those faux treads that I made previously out of the same material as this flooring. Now as this is a full board, I've got about a 5.5 inch gap left over. I've left the same distance to the front of the tread as well, so that way it kind of creates a bit of a border all the way around, which I'm hoping is going to make it look a little bit nicer. I've also gone ahead and ripped these down, and I've cut a little groove in the back to kind of link up and sink in with the flooring, so it's a bit of a stronger joint. Now installing the faux tread, as it wraps around the corner, I'm going to have to cut a miter in the two pieces to be able to miter them together to have a nice clean transition. And to glue the pieces down, I'll be using PL and wood glue to make sure everything stays in place. And as I didn't want any mechanical fixings or screws or anything like that, this is the best way to hold it all together and make it feel nice and solid. Now as this is a super tricky thing to clamp, there's really nowhere to put clamps on this thing. I'm going to use filament tape. Now this stuff is great for those awkward situations because you can really stretch it and help lock things together. Now with that all dried up and cured, it's rock solid. I mean rock solid, that ain't going nowhere. There's also a really nice looking detail, which is unfortunate because I'm about to cover it all up with more posts and railings. Now you've seen a full post and you've seen a half post, but I feel like this is the world's first 3/4 post. Now when doing renovations, you kind of just have to adapt to what's already going on there. And before, they had a full post kind of just floating away from the wall, and it looks super goofy. So I figured this is the best thing I can do in this situation. Okay, so now that post is temporarily in. For me to get the measurement of that railing section, I need to get this one kind of in as well, so I can measure between the two. Now this post is a transition between the flat railing and the one that's going down the stairs, which is the scary one. And I figured out I'm going to attach this one and most of the other posts the same way, and that's by half lapping it over the tread and the riser. And let me show you what I mean by that. Now I've gone ahead and I've cut out the underside of the post for the half lap joint. And when I sit in position, you'll notice that there's a bit of a gap between the back of the post and the front of the riser, which is obviously no good. And that's because the nosing of the stair tread has a 1 inch overhang. Now for this to sit flush with the riser, which is what we need, I'm gonna have to cut a notch out of the nosing to accept the post. Now in cutting into something that you've just spent hours making and it's already glued into place, it's super scary. So I made this jig to help assist me cut the perfect notch out to receive the post. Now each post from now on are going to be half lapped again, however they're going to be attached to the face of the stairs and the framing of the stairs rather than the framing of the floor. And then once the post is temporarily locked in, sitting nice and level, I can then go and get a measurement between the two, cut the railing, and then kind of dry assemble the whole thing together. Okay, with this section, and it's not permanently glued down or glued together just yet, and I'm not going to do so until I can figure out what's happening with the next post and that kind of situation going on down there. Now I would say I'm a pretty confident woodworker. I've taken on some pretty technical challenges in my woodworking career and I've got through them. However, stairs are a whole different beast. And if it hasn't already come across yet, I got no idea of what I'm doing here and what I should do next. And I've spent endless hours of sleep trying to figure out the best layout for these stair posts. And I could have just copied the previous layout, however I spent years walking up and down these stairs looking at what the previous builder did and thinking to myself, why did he do it like that? Now, he might have been right, and I could be completely wrong, but I guess we're gonna find out. Okay, so now that both posts are somewhat in and plumb, I can now get the distance and the angle for the railing. Now, to help me with that, I've found the longest straight edge that I can possibly find, and I've clamped it to each one of the posts at the height where the railing's gonna sit. Now, for me, that's 36 inches from the top of the nosing on the tread. And with that straight edge, basically referencing the top of my handrail, I'm able to get a perfect measurement from point to point. I'm also going to get an exact angle with my bevel. Now once the railing is cut to length, I'm able to wiggle it in with a little bit of assistance. Also, having the posts not fully glued down, I can loosen them off to give me a little bit more room to get that railing in between the two posts. I also think this is one of the hardest sections to overcome on this staircase. So I spent a lot of time just sitting there thinking if I've made the right decision or not. And after spending some time thinking that this project is taking way too long, I'm just gonna get on with it and I'm gonna permanently glue this whole section in together. Now I was thinking to myself that this section is probably the most important section to be as strong as possible because it has the biggest drop on the other side of it. So I also added some long screws to really lock it in together nice and tight, and I found this was a lot easier when gluing and clamping the whole railing together. And any of the screw holes that you do see, I do come up with a pretty good idea on how to blend them in towards the end of the video. Okay, so now this section is fully in. Before I continue it around and down the staircase, I'm gonna let it sit and dry and cure for 24 hours before I start really messing around with it. So I'm gonna jump ship and make a start on the other side. Now installing the lower section of the post and railings here, it's pretty repetitive at this point. I'm just going through the same steps I've already covered, but consistency here is key. I wanna make sure that I keep the same standard throughout the whole project. Everything needs to be lined up perfectly to make sure that the whole system stays solid and looks clean. And there is a bit of relief getting past that previous stage. It was one of the stages that I lost a lot of sleep over, and I don't know why I get worried about certain things because I guess I don't want to make any major screw ups. But I got told once when I was doing my apprenticeship that a good carpenter isn't someone who doesn't make mistakes, it's someone who knows how to fix their mistakes correctly. And to also fix a mistake without people knowing that they made a mistake. That's what makes a good carpenter. Anyway, there's still some challenges ahead and I'm not letting my guard down just yet until this whole thing is wrapped up. Okay, so now with this handrail drying, this one over here is fully dried and it's rock hard. So now I can start trying to focus on this section of railing coming down this side of the staircase. And I got a strong feeling it's going to be a bit of a headache. So over the past couple of weeks, in my head, I've gone through every kind of scenario to which this handrail can possibly go by. And I hate every single one of them. However, this one I come up with, I hate the least. So I guess I'm going to go with that. Now this is obviously made out of 2x4s. And I got to recreate this out of the handrail material that I've already milled up. So I guess I should probably get my miter on. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't just make one prototype, I made like 6 or 7. And each one I made slightly longer, slightly different angle until everything lined up where I had the exact same measurement from each nose in. It was perfectly flat, perfectly level, square, and it did all the angles that it was supposed to do. And after all that, I still wasn't fully confident that it was going to turn out aesthetically pleasing and practical. But does it really matter? There's always someone with a different opinion. Unfortunately for me, that person happens to be my wife. Okay, so this last section of handrail, ultimately the hardest part of this whole section, we've been debating whether to go just flat into the post 36 inches up from this step, which is going to look like this, or continue the rise on this last little section and add a little puzzle piece like this. Now originally, Chelsea was opting for this, and I was opting for the flat, but the tables have turned, and she prefers the flat now, and I'm kind of on the fence about this, so I just don't know. I think ultimately, the safer option is probably just to go with the flat. So that's what I'm going to do. Now after some back and forth, we came together on a mutual decision, so I immediately acted and glued it all together so she couldn't change her mind. And then once the glue had fully dried, I can then get this last section of railing fully installed. And I remember feeling a huge sigh of relief having that last section in, until I suddenly remembered I have the next section of this project to start losing sleep over. Okay, so with all the posts and all the railings now installed, I'm way less likely to fall to my death, which is awesome. I still obviously have to put all the spindles in, however, before I do that, you'll notice that the way that I attach the post to the staircase, that it's left behind these perfect 3/8 of an inch wide holes. Now I need to fill these holes with some plugs. Now I went the extra mile, and when I cut my posts to size, I kept my offcuts like this one. Now this is the exact offcut to this post, and I went ahead and I drilled my dowels or my plugs in the offcut. So now when I use these plugs, in theory, I'm not going to say they're going to be invisible, but they should blend in pretty damn good. Now I cut the plugs way longer than I drilled the hole, that way I can beat them all in and still clean them off afterwards. I found the best way to glue these in is to glue the hole rather than the plug, so I used a kebab stick to get the glue all the way around the inside of the hole. This just creates a lot less mess. Now the most important thing here is when you beat them in, you want to make sure that the grain of the plug matches the grain direction of whatever you're beating the plug into. I also found that if you get them nice and wet, you can also clean off all the glue, and it helps them swell up and fully fill out that hole. Okay, so now this is really starting to take shape and it looks freaking awesome, and I'm getting excited. And I'm happy to be at this stage of the project, though we're not done yet. Now I guess the next thing for me to do is probably the next thing I've been losing sleep over, and that's installing the spindles. Now for the spindles themselves, I'm going to be using these black metal round spindles that are 5/8 of an inch thick. Now I have one straight one and one with a little ball, so we can kind of create a bit of a pattern. Now the pattern may change, but the spacing for these spindles will not. So let's get into that. Now it's really hard to get a straight line between the center of these two posts. So I set up a laser level to get a nice reference point, and then I lay down some tape so I don't do any scratching, made a mark at the center of each post, and then used a combination square to transfer that mark down each tread. Now I'm going to be going from the underside of the railing straight into the stair treads, and then when figuring out the distance on the runs, it's slightly different to figuring out the distance on the flat landings, and I'm going to cover both. Now for the entire staircase, it's important that your spacing is below or less than 4 inches in width. That's super, super important. Now a good rule of thumb for figuring out the spacings going straight into the treads is to completely ignore the treads themselves. And you want to go from the distance of riser to riser. So the distance that I have from the front of the riser on the step below to the front of the riser on the step above is exactly 9 inches on all of them. So I've gone ahead to make things a little bit easier is to cut a block exactly at 9 inches. Now, another good rule of thumb is for this style of spindles is to start your front spindle flush with the front of the riser below. Now, there's a few reasons for this. I think mostly it's aesthetics, and it just helps keep things a little bit consistent. Your gaps flow equally all the way down, which is again super important. Now, to figure out my spacings is pretty simple. I've cut a block exactly 9 inches, which is what I have, and I have two 5/8 spindles in that section of run, basically, which is 1.25 inches. So I can take 1.25 inches away from my 9 inches, and then whatever's remaining I can divide by 2, so which is 3 7/8. Now I got 5/8 at the front, 3 7/8 gap, 5/8 in the middle, 3 7/8. Now on my 5/8 I've marked the center point, so now I can use my block and push it right against the back or the front of the riser, and then I can use that to mark each step. Now in theory, each one should all be super consistent. The spindle should be flush with the front of the riser, and yeah, I think that's how it's done. Well, that's how I'm gonna do it anyway. Now, once I've transferred each mark on each one of the treads, I also have to be able to transfer that to the underside of the railing. This is where a laser level comes in real handy. Now, when drilling my holes for my spindles, I have a Forstner bit the same width as my spindles. Now, this is the best drill bit for this job. It's clean, it's precise, it's perfect. Now, with that said, it's super difficult to drill holes on an angle with this kind of drill bit. So I also made a simple little jig to assist me to drill all the holes on the underside of the railings. Now, the depth of my holes are going to be deeper in the underside of the railing than they are on the treads, and this will make more sense when we come to install the spindles. Okay, so now that the runs are done, I can now start focusing on the flatter section, the landings. Now these are a little bit easier in the way that I don't have to rely on my own math. Now there's a couple of spindle calculators that I like to use online, which are completely free. And I like the one that I like to use down below. And essentially all you have to do is calculate your distance between posts and the thickness of your spindles, and then punch that information in, and it will tell you exactly what you need for your spacings and how to lay them out. Now that is a lot easier, but I still have a little predicament. Now with the landings, I have two options for my spacing in between my spindles. Option one, in my opinion, is the more professional one, and that's equal gaps in between the spindles and the same equal gap either end. So say my gap is 3.5 inches. I got 3.5 inches in between each spindle, and I have 3.5 inches either end. Now that looks great, but that gap in between the spindles is not going to be the same as the gap in between the spindles on the run. So they don't match. Now option two is the least professional but more aesthetically pleasing, and that's having the same gaps as the run, so 3 7/8 in my case, all the way throughout my spindles, but the ends are going to be slightly different. Now, does it really matter? No. Are people likely going to notice? Probably not. I mean, you will now, but it's definitely going to be more aesthetically pleasing having the gaps the same, so I'm thinking I'm going to shut off my brain and use that option. Now, I'm often faced with the decision, do I go aesthetics or tradition? It's one of those questions that always comes up in projects like this. On one hand, you've got the traditional approach, and on the other, you've got more of the modern aesthetic. But at the end of the day, does it really matter? I mean, it's all in the eye of the beholder, yada, yada, yada. Everyone has their own preferences, and no matter what you choose, there's always someone who will have a different opinion. So I'm always going to go with what felt right for me, or whatever my wife tells me to do. So now that I have all the holes drilled for the spindles, I think I got it right, but I can't tell if I've screwed it up just yet because the spindles don't go in until I put finish on the post and the railings. Now before I apply the finish, everything's got to get a really good finished sand. The whole thing's been manhandled, it's been glued, it's been clamped, been absolutely abused. Now it turns out sanding railings and posts is really difficult. You can't use an orbital sander on there because it leaves swirls and there's so many curves, bends and stops. So I found the best combination is the satisfying card scraper and then just roughing it by hand. Now for the finish on the posts and the railings, I'm going to be using Osmo Oil Raw. Now this is a bit different from what I used on the treads, and here's why. I love Osmo Oil, I use it 90% of the time, but when it comes to floors, in my house especially, with the kids and the dogs and the wife that I have, who all don't respect wood, I wanted to make sure that I have a more durable commercial finish for the treads to stand up for more daily wear. That commercial finish, however, on the posts and railings would look terrible because of how it's applied. With Osmo Oil, it's so simple. You simply just buff it on, you let it sit for a few minutes, and then buff off the residue. And if you sanded the wood correctly, you can get a beautiful glass-like finish. It only requires 2 coats with a light sand in between, which makes it much easier to work with for this kind of woodworking. Now that I have all the finish on the railings and the posts, they look freaking awesome and they are silky smooth. I'm really happy how they've turned out. I can now jump back into getting these spindles installed. Now when I drilled the holes for the spindles, I mentioned that I've drilled the upper hole way deeper than I did the one going into the tread. Now the reason for this is because I have to physically be able to get the spindles in place and also keep them in place without them falling out. So I drilled the holes deeper in the railings so I can physically get the spindles up into position, maneuver them into the actual treads themselves, and still have them so they're all locked in and they don't slip out. I also added some no more nails, which dries clear, which is going to help lock the spindles into position. You really don't want them spinning around and rattling inside of the holes. And as these particular spindles are aluminum, I'm able to cut them with my miter saw, which makes things way more simpler. So now that I got this one section done, I'm pretty confident that I haven't fully screwed it up. So now all I gotta do is basically the same as everything else in this staircase. Just repeat it like 1,000,000 times. Okay, so in this box holds the last remaining part to this staircase, to which I can finally move on from this chapter of my life. Now you remember when I made the posts that I did the whole wraparound thing, but that leaves the ends of the posts all exposed and kind of ugly, and I can't leave it like that because that would be ridiculous. So I purchased, now this is I think the only thing to the staircase that I actually purchased other than the spindles. I mean, I'm not a freaking wizard. And then these cute little hats that sit on top of the post. Now this isn't exactly the one that I ordered. For some reason they sent a different one, but it's close enough. And I'm in a bit of a time crunch, so it'll do. And essentially, they just sit on top, like so. And they just add like a real cute little detail to all the tops of all the posts. Now as a few of the posts have been modified, I've got the half post, I've even got the 3/4 post. So I have to modify these little hats, or whatever you want to call them, to suit. Now after gluing all the caps down with my questionable cocktail of adhesives, this project is now actually finally complete. Now this has been the second most challenging build of my career so far, after this guy. And if you made it this far throughout the video, I just want to say thank you so much for your support. And if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now if you excuse me, I'm just going to sit there for a while and pretend that I didn't almost lose my mind building it. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, actually, and if you like this video and you want to see some more of my stuff, I have some more of these massive projects over here you should also check out. Hit that subscribe. Hit it. Listen. Doing all this. Music up.